question, answer and live debate. We invited the leaders of 7 parties to take leader of the Labour Party, Jeremy Corbyn.
Tonight, I am here to debate the future of our country. The question in this election is whether we want a country for the many or just the few. The state of our NHS, our children's schools, social care for older people, our young people saddled with debt. None of that is remotely strong or stable. And now the Conservatives want 5 more years of cuts to our vital public services to fund tax handouts for the wealthy few. Labour will make very different choices. There will be no tax rises for 95% of taxpayers, but we will ask those with the most to contribute a bit more so no one is held back from achieving their potential. On June the 8th, you have a choice. More cuts in services and living standards with the Conservatives, or vote Labour to transform Britain for the many, not the few. Living standards have fallen in the past 7 years under the coalition government with the Liberal Democrats and the Tories, and now under the Tory government itself. 6 million people are earning less than the living wage. 1 million are on 0 hours contracts. Public sector workers have had a pay cut of at least 14% over the past 7 years. We will lift the pay cap on the public sector. We will introduce a living wage of £10 an hour by 2020. And we won't punish workers who want to take their rights to a tribunal where they have to pay charges and fees. We will abolish that. Our determination is that those who produce the wealth of this country should benefit from the wealth of this country. What we've seen is a massive gap growing between those at work and those at the top. It's times 186 between those on the shop floor and those in the boardroom. That has to change, and we will ensure it does.
Angus Robertson.
Trying to take personal independence payments away from people with disabilities, and then you churned yourselves around in a few days on that. You're not credible on this issue.
I know there is you want to spend.
I'd like to bring you to respond, please, to the point about corporation tax, because that is a risk you're taking.
Paul, that is complete nonsense, if I may say so. Raising... Our corporation tax has been consistently lowered by this government with the support of the Liberal Democrats since 2010. What we're proposing is to put it up during the lifetime of a Parliament to 26%.
Yes, but
that is less, may I finish? That is less than it was in 2010. And if you put that corporation tax up, you're then in a position to deal with the crisis in social care, the crisis in our NHS, properly fund our schools, and not ask head teachers to collect from the parents to pay the teachers. And I would just say this, since Amber Rudd seems so confident that this is a country at ease with itself, have you been to a food bank? Have you seen people sleeping around our stations? Have you seen the level... the levels of poverty that exist because of your government's conscious decisions on benefits.
Jeremy,
It's a government for the past 7 years that has borrowed more, run up a greater deficit and cut public services at the same time, and had the lowest growth rate of any industrial country. It isn't, the system they have is not working. What we're proposing is to raise corporation tax, yes, in order to make the funding commitments that I've already outlined, but it's also to establish a serious national investment bank to invest in infrastructure all around this country so we do get a sustainable, growing economy. We cannot go on giving money away to the very rich. This government's proposing another 60 billion in tax giveaways in the next 5 years. Instead, I say turn it round and invest in the future of all of our people.
I'd like to
happen on leaving the European Union is that we cease to be members of the single market, and therefore free movement ends. What we're saying is that every EU national that is resident in this country must be given permanent rights of residence here and not blocked for it by this government. And secondly, that we would ask, as we've already done in opposition, that all European governments do the same for British nationals that are living there. And that we recognise the massive contribution made by people to this country who've come from all over the world, as well as from Europe, to our health service, our education, our industries, our universities and our science.
Both of the things you've said are a different point from the one I put to you, which is, would you make any promise on cutting immigration?
What I would say is we will have a fair and managed migration system that is based on the needs of this country and the rights of family reunion.
What is fair?
Fair is where you bring people in when they've got jobs to come to, or it's necessary for them to be working here, or we need them to assist in the economy. That is fair, but it's also important.
So immigration will go up, Jeremy.
It's also important that we maintain the links of universities with universities across Europe. This government,
is it going to
under
go up?
Theresa May, sent vans around Brent telling people to go home, has refused to allow refugee children in. I think we need to.
You have
problems that we have of exploitation of workers in this country and groups of workers that have been brought in wholesale from lower paid economies in Central Europe is a serious one. Those people are themselves grossly exploited. They're brought here to undermine existing pay and working conditions and create... Hang on, can I finish? That will make the situation worse in any community where that takes place. I was demanding that we have a proper regulation whilst we were still members of the European Union before the referendum. That whole strategy has to stop. There has to be a managed migration that isn't designed to undermine working conditions
we are
in
now
this country.
Seeing the Labour Party,
and a lot of people make a great deal of money out of the poverty of those people.
For years, I am speak loud.
I'm very clear that we will negotiate tariff-free trade access to the European market so that our manufacturing industry jobs are defended and supported, and we have a growing economy as a result of that. We have made a number of very clear spending commitments in our manifesto. They're set out here in a spending plan. They're also set out in the manifesto itself. The government, the Conservative government, has made a lot of choices. We know what those choices are. Our schools are underfunded, our hospitals are overcrowded, our students are saddled with debt, there's a growing housing crisis. And at every single turn, their answer is to further reduce corporation tax and further reduce tax for the very wealthiest in our society.
Are you sure?
I'll give you an example.
Are you sure that only yesterday you couldn't remember the cost of one of your policies?
I'm absolutely sure that they add up. Absolutely clearly about this. For example, if we want to remove university tuition fees, and we do, so our students are not saddled with debt, and restore maintenance grants so that all children, whatever their background, have a chance of going to university, that will cost £11 billion. I think that is money well spent. I think that is the kind of investment this country needs.
Do you think
why should a child's future be determined by the postcode in which they're born? That's why we are determined to bring in free preschool 30 hours a week from 2 to 4-year-olds and make sure that every primary school child gets a free lunch every day so they can learn while they're properly fed.
Jeremy,
government and the UK government policy
Labour's different in
going to be a UK policy, and it will mean that the money is made available there by increasing tax, not for the first 95% of the population, but the other 5% to ensure the funds are there. Because I am fed up with... I'm absolutely fed up with the idea that so many children growing up in poorer households and poorer communities don't get the same chances as others to get to university and get on in life. They lose, and we all lose, because we lose those skilled, brilliant people that want to contribute to our community.
Angus Robertson, you have talked about our foreign interventions and our safety here at home.
What happened in Manchester was unbelievably abominable in every way. Innocent lives were taken of mainly young women out enjoying themselves. I want to live in a country that protects the right of people to go out and enjoy themselves at any town or any city in this country. The consequences of that are appalling for those families, and I hope those that are perpetrated this act are all discovered and brought to book. But there's also a question we have to ask about the number of police officers. Under Amber Rudd's time in the Home Secretary and Theresa May before that, 20,000 police officers have lost their jobs. There are fewer police officers around than there were 7 years ago, and those cuts are going to continue. I think it's important that we restore that. What I also think, if I may say so, is the point that Angus was alluding to about terror threats and other threats to our security. There are terrorist threats, obviously. There are also cyber attacks threats, as the National Health Service discovered. It's also important that we recognise that leaving large spaces of, for example, Libya, ungoverned, leaves an opportunity for those who wish to do harm to an awful lot of people, a space in which to develop to do that harm. If you intervene somewhere, the consequences go on for a very long time. And I think we have to think it through. But I'm not saying...
Without the police cuts, are you saying the attack in Manchester wouldn't have happened?
No, I'm absolutely not saying that. The attack in Manchester happened because somebody decided that they had... they wanted to go and kill a large number of people for some perverted belief in their minds. They have to be dealt with, and those people that were under threat have to be protected. What I'm also saying is, though, it would be extremely unwise for any government to ignore, any government anywhere in the world, to ignore what is happening in Libya, where large areas are left ungoverned and very dangerous forces are arising there. What we need to do is recognise the human rights and justice of people all around the world and be prepared to support them, not just go in and bomb and do nothing about it afterwards, which is what happened in Libya.
You've said just saying 20,000.
No, I said 20,000 have been cut by the Conservative government.
Right, so you would bring
we
back
would put 10,000 more on. What I would also want to add, and I think it's important, is the response of people in this country to what happened in Manchester. I was in Manchester straight after the event took place, and Tim was there as well, and Amber. The most amazing sense of community unity came together. They were not going to allow that individual who killed those people to divide our communities. They were going to be united in response to it. Just remind you that in 2005, Theresa May voted against the anti-terrorist legislation at that time. And she voted against it, as did David Davis, as did a number of people that are now in your cabinet, because they felt that that legislation was giving too much executive power. My opposition to anti-terror legislation isn't opposition to protecting us from terrorism. It is simply saying there must be judicial oversight over what is done in our name. You cannot give...
There is judicial oversight.
I'd like to get the other party...
Jeremy, you want
the Terrorism Act
you
in the
cannot
1980s. The response to the people of Manchester was absolutely magnificent. All communities of all faiths came together. And I utterly deplore the language that Paul Nuttall uses and the subliminal attack the whole time on people of Muslim faith in what you say.
You invited Hamas. You invited Hamas to the House of Commons and called them your friends.
Paul, if I may just complete a sentence. Thank you.
To the House of Commons.
I think we have to recognise we live in a multi-faith, multicultural society. An attack on any religion is totally unacceptable, and we should recognise that we should bring people together and have much stronger communities as a result. We absolutely adhere to the Paris Climate Change Agreement, and we should urge the American people to press their government, their Senate and their House and their President to adhere to it as well. And in this country, we are determined to achieve 60% of renewable energy by 2030. We're also determined to reduce emissions, but it's not just about climate change emissions. It's also about our attitude towards the environment, levels of air quality and air pollution in our cities, which are not being addressed by this government. And also, when we did have a growing and thriving solar power industry in this country, what did they do? Cut the feed-in tariffs, which destroyed and damaged a lot of that industry.
Amber Rudd.
We need a different approach.
Amber Rudd.
Leadership is about understanding the people you represent, is about being prepared to learn, is about not being so high and mighty you can't take advice. It is also about bringing people with you. It is also about ensuring that your responsibilities to protect the safety and security of everybody in this country and to lead a government that cares for everybody in the country and doesn't walk by on the other side when there are people that are homeless, there are people that are starving, and we have millions of our children living in poverty. It's leadership to lead a government that is prepared to say to our society, we cannot go on like this. We have to start putting more money into our public services and our resources. We have to have an economy that works for all, and we don't have to have a spiv economy that hands tax relief to the biggest corporations and the wealthiest people whilst ignoring the desperate cries for social help of so many people in our country. 1,000 people elected me to lead this party, and I'm very proud to lead this party. Tonight, we've seen the real choice facing our country between a Labour government and a Conservative government. This election will decide whether young people are saddled with debt or freed from it, whether we invest in our National Health Service, schools and social care, or they continue to be cut, whether older people get the dignity they deserve or see their incomes fall. On June the 8th, you have the power to decide. Vote Labour for the many, not the few.